State of Wisconsin versus Demetrius James, 17 CF 4216. Appearances, please.
Ian Vance Curzan appears for the state. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Demetrius James appearing in person out of custody with his attorneys, Anik Ahmad and Mindy Moore.
Right, to Mr. James, welcome to you, sir, and welcome to both attorneys. Am I correct, counsel, both were here today for purposes of sentencing on possession of a firearm by a felon?
That's correct, Your Honor. This was set over from last time.
And the maximum penalties, it must be stated, would be $25,000 and or 10 years divided between initial incarceration and extended supervision?
That's correct. I believe it's a class 2 felony.
Right. At the time that there was a change of plea, did the attorneys make statements regarding their plea discussions? If that did occur, I of course don't know about that. Could you tell me that information again?
Certainly, Judge. The defendant pled guilty on February 3rd of this year to count 1, possession of a firearm by a person adjudicated delinquent. The state agreed to dismiss and read in count 2 and count 3, carrying a concealed weapon and obstructing an officer, and the parties are free to argue.
Okay. Is that accurate as well, Mr. Ahmad?
That is correct, Your Honor. That is also what the plea forms reflect.
All right. Thank you for that predicate information. I'll look to all parties, beginning with the state district attorney.
Thank you, Judge. This case has sort of a long and tortured history, as Your Honor can probably tell by the incident date on this case. This incident is from August 16th of 2016. So it's almost 4 years old now. The incident itself is fairly uncomplicated. The police were patrolling the area near 21st and Clark Street in Milwaukee. They conducted a traffic stop around 5 p.m. that evening for a license plate violation, window tint, and the defendant rolled a stop sign essentially. When the officers made contact with him, they noticed unique behavior. He seemed very nervous, heavy breathing, shaking, wouldn't make eye contact with the officers. The officers held him there as they summoned for a dog sniff on the vehicle. Eventually, they made a decision to pull the defendant out of the car after the defendant had spontaneously reached into the back seat and grabbed a wad of cash that appeared to be sitting on the floor behind the passenger seat of the vehicle. After they removed the defendant from the car, they kept talking to him for a little bit as they waited for this dog sniff to come, and they had him go and sit on the curb near the vehicle. Shortly thereafter, the defendant took off from the scene on foot. He was chased by both of the officers briefly, but he was able to get away. After he had fled the scene, the officers searched the vehicle, and in the back seat, they found a loaded firearm that had an extended magazine coming from it. It was a handgun. It had 25 unfired cartridges within the magazine. They also found $8,000 in cash sitting on the back seat right near where the firearm was located, which was right near where the defendant had been reaching and pulled out that cash. Ultimately, forensic processing of the firearm revealed the defendant's fingerprints, a left index fingerprint found on the magazine, and his right index fingerprint was found on the magazine. He wasn't arrested again until January 6, 2017. So it's not as though he went and turned himself in or anything after he had ran away from the scene. His juvenile history, he has obviously a felony adjudication or what would be a felony if he had been convicted as an adult. There's a PSI in this matter. I think the PSI sort of, I don't want to say misstates his record, but they look to some adjudications and mention them, and then they go into detail and explain more. So I didn't really understand that. However, my sort of tabulation of his entire record, this is his first adult conviction. However, he did run into a lot of problems as a juvenile. In 2009, he had a criminal damage to property, criminal trespass, and battery adjudications. He also had what appeared to be an attempted disorderly conduct and battery as a party to a crime. In 2010, an adjudication for possession of a dangerous weapon by a person under 18. That is one that is explained sort of in detail in the PSI. In 2011, he had an adjudication for operating a motor vehicle without owner's consent, the Class I felony. And then there were 3 burglaries from 2012, all coming around the same time. There were incident dates from November 6th, 2011, April 21st, 2012, and December 19th, 2012. And as is outlined in the PSI, that last one came just a short time after the defendant had been released from custody. He had done time at Lincoln Hills as a juvenile, and those essentially while he was there, it looks like he was charged with some type of battery by prisoners offense, but that was ultimately dismissed. There was no adjudication ever reached in that case. The predicate offense identified in the criminal complaint, I believe, was the 2012 burglary, a burglary that occurred in the city of Mequon. It was basically a home burglary. The defendant talks about this burglary and the others in his PSI. Basically says he was hanging out with a crowd of people who likes to go into houses and take electronics. And he doesn't have any adult convictions. He's 24 years old today. The state is obviously, I'm free to argue for whatever sentence that I think is appropriate. I've decided to leave the sentence to the court. I think there's good arguments as to why this is an aggravated case, and there are good arguments as to good things the defendant has done and ways that he has turned around his life. Obviously, I see sort of aggravated factors being the fact that he had this gun for, it was his gun. It wasn't like he picked it up once or something like that. He bought it. He had it in his car with him driving around. He wasn't up front with the police on scene. He ran away. He didn't turn himself in until he was arrested in a vehicle later on, where he had a small amount of marijuana. He does have, I think it's slightly aggravating that he does have the prior adjudication for possession of a firearm by a person under 18. And I say that because one of the things he identifies in his PSI statements is that he didn't really know that he couldn't possess a firearm. And the PSI writer and myself alike find that kind of hard to believe, especially given the amount of trouble he had been in as a juvenile. He admitted to the PSI writer that he's a continued user of THC. This PSI was written in March of 2020, and he stated in the PSI that the last time he had used THC was in March of 2020, so he was out on bail in this case. So that's somewhat of a concern, and I think that's somewhat of an aggravating factor. There was a motion hearing, and this case pended for such a very long time because that motion hearing sort of bounced around for months and months and months. He testified in that motion hearing. I think his testimony in the hearing was extremely unbelievable at times. I asked him point blank whether or not he recalled having the gun in the car, and he would dance around the question and say he didn't recall. He would acknowledge that he picked up the money right from where the gun was, but then when I would follow up that with, well, did you see the gun there or whatever, he would he wouldn't answer. He just would say he doesn't recall. But he ultimately accepted responsibility. We were scheduled for a trial back in February of this year. He decided to plead guilty on the day of trial. He's been fine on supervision for the pendency of this case. He's not missed court. He's respectful to the court staff. He shows up for court. It seems to me that he's pretty respectful with his attorneys. He's been out of custody for a very long time now on this case and not picked up any new cases. And quite frankly, that includes what I would call significant period of time that the state didn't issue this case, because this case wasn't issued until 2017. And the incident date is in 2016. So from the incident date to today, he hasn't been in any trouble. And I think that reflects well on his character. He's been out of custody this whole time. I've noticed that the defense submitted some letters, and some of those letters are from his employer, and he is apparently a very good employee, and I think he should get credit for that. I think that reflects positively on his character, and would be something that, he's showing that he can be of positive influence on our community. He's a father. He seems like he's a good father to his children, from what I've seen in the letters that were submitted, and he honestly seems to have matured. A lot of the issues that he's ran into in his life, most of them were when he was a juvenile. He obviously made a very poor decision here. Your Honor is probably very aware of why our community takes firearms so seriously and firearm offenses so seriously, because our city experiences shooting after shooting after shooting, year after year after year. So that's generally why this is a serious offense, and why the defendant should be sentenced in a serious manner. However, I think he's done a lot to earn probation if the court felt that was where it wanted to go with him. So that being said, I'm going to leave the sentence to the court. I don't have any further comments unless the court has any questions or needs clarifications on anything I said. Thank you.
No, been very clear. Thank you. Counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. And before I get into that, I just wanted to make sure that the court did get a chance to review our letter, which included character letters, cover letter, as well as some photographs of Mr. James, his significant other, and children.
Yes, a number of letters and photographs.
Okay.
Yes.
And PSI obviously is quite thorough in its discussion. And so to start off, I do appreciate the state's comments here. I think they are accurate and fair in recognizing what Mr. James' strengths are and how he separates himself from a lot of other defendants that find themselves in the justice system, and especially this Attorney Nolan and his attorneys are both here today because we believe in Mr. James. Of all of our clients, he has really demonstrated so much great character by himself. We've gotten to know him, the significant other who's present here in court, and her heirs here. His mother is also here. They've been involved in this case. He's always made it to court. He's always been very respectful of us, and I think the state recognized that just now. So I can certainly appreciate that, and we are impressed with him as his attorney. But going back to the facts in this case, this was almost 4 years ago, just maybe 1 week shy. This was literally maybe a day or two, Judge. I think after the term of court trials, I think there was a lot of tension, and that may have played some sort of role in Mr. James being nervous and fleeing from the scene. What I think is important is while officers found a gun, there was no indication of any kind of drugs. There wasn't any odor of marijuana. No drugs were found whatsoever. No scales, no baggies, no odors of any kind. And while there was cash found, I think even at the time, Mr. James had indicated to the police he had showed them during the stop that this is money I have. It's scholarship I got, unsubsidized loans. He didn't have a bank account at that time. There was a substantial amount of cash, which is why I think police were suspicious. But there was no drugs found at all on this person. And he was first in the search, and then eventually the part of the search. All the same on the part of the police. And so those counts are dismissed, but they've been read in here. But I think that also, the court can consider that there is really no indication of drug sales whatsoever at all. There's no indicia in this case, completely absent. And I also think that the court can consider, some of the cultural things. I mean, I've had clients where they make videos, music videos, rap videos, where they're just flashing money. Right? It might be a cultural generation thing, maybe to look cool, or in a way that when someone doesn't have a bank account, they just change their name back. As far as his juvenile record, Your Honor, when he went to Lincoln Hills, he was 16 years old, and I think, whether or not he knew about the firearm warning, that's a good question. And me and counsel have reviewed the juvenile records, the minutes of it. I think Judge was his judge at the time. We didn't see anything in the minutes that indicated there was a warning. But even if there was, I think it's fair to say, he wouldn't have fully appreciated that. I think also some defendants that are very young think that, the juvenile case, the record is strong, right? And when you're 19 or when you're 18 or whatever, that's wiped off the record, not available to the public. So there could have been certain things about that. While that's not a defense, I think it is mitigating that he was young, he didn't appreciate that, he may have had a completely incorrect assumption. What I think sets him apart, is, as the state said, what has he done in the past 4 years? He has really turned his life around. The state just recognized that he's matured greatly. We would agree. The maturity comes, right, not by just someone getting older, but by having responsibilities, right, having stability, being able to have their act together and maintain that. And he's done so for the past 4 years. Really consistent performance on time. He's made all of his fortunes. He has a stable job at Colt Construction. I don't believe Mr. James has actually a college degree, but he's earning $17 an hour and works 35 hours a week. He's a provider, right, for his girlfriend, who they told me that they are seeking to get married after this virus situation is under control. He's a provider for his 2 children that they are both with Ms. Herrera. He's here in court. They are 2 and 3 years old, I believe, and he has been in a relationship with her for about 5 years. So oftentimes, the court sees defendants who have, multiple children with multiple women or so-called baby mamas, and while I'm not here to judge that, I think the issue is, are they being responsible, right, towards their children? And that's often an issue. But Mr. James has demonstrated his responsibility, and from that responsibility, right, is where he's grown so much. And the character letters demonstrate, discuss some of the amazing accomplishments and characteristics. As his boss says, he's a hardworking employee. He's trusted enough to run his own crew on several different job sites. The kind of work that they're doing, I think, is also very helpful for Milwaukee as a city. Has been developing rapidly, and I think that's been the goal of the city with new projects, and their construction company receives contracts. I've seen a lot of the detailed paperwork, the demolition they're involved in, the construction they're involved in, and the employer even mentions that he's given Demetrius a loan of $7,000 to purchase a home. This was written back in July, and just today, Demetrius and Anna, they told me that they expect to close on a home tomorrow in South Milwaukee. It's a home that they want to use for rental income. They are raising their kids in New Berlin, which is where they live. They want to stay there because of the good schools in that area. But this shows a lot of insight on the part of the young man. He was recognized, hard work, and I think the older gentlemen that he works with at Colt Construction also are a good influence on him in order to ensure that he has something to look forward to and invest in a stable job rather than just bounce around from job to job or temp agency. He has something to build with this company. The next letter, also from Colt Construction, said that he's worked for the last 3 years, and this was written in 2019, and he did have newborn children. He's certified as asbestos supervisor. It's helped remove hazards in the community. Right, so there's some of the other job sites, McDonald's, community centers, that he's worked on. Another character letter by Corey Higgins said, he talks about when he was in basketball, he was a very good player, he was a true leader. He was the type of young man that you could count on. He was selfless. He helps people out in bullying situations. He was a good heart. Wonderful father to his kids. We also have another letter from his teacher, who taught him literacy and U.S. history as his coach in basketball. He indicates that Demetrius was polite while in class, has a good sense of humor. the most unselfish player as a coach. And I think that, again, is in a sense corroborated by the fact that he's a man that's providing for his family, and that there's a certain amount of sacrifice that a responsible man has to have in order to provide for it. And that's, I think, part of this characteristic of being selfish. He's demonstrated over the past 2 years, and he had that quality even when he was younger. He's a true team player. He's a genuine real person. He's an absolutely wonderful father. And he does enjoy the time that he spends with his kids, and I think that's necessary in order to have a relationship and have a stable family. There is a letter from Hannah Herrera herself. She also would like to make a brief statement just to update the court. The letter is from October of last year, but she basically talks about how he's very caring and thoughtful. They started as friends, right? That just shows that he went about his relationship the right way in terms of building a true foundation, right? It's not just something that was immature and irresponsible, right? And that's been shown over time. And I think all of these things speak to the spirit. She talks about how much time he spends taking care of the kids at the zoo, festivals, and activities at home. He helps hold the family together. And the pictures indicate as such. There's so many pictures of his beautiful two kids here, Judge. They seem very happy, surrounded by friends and family. I think he just celebrated his second birthday with one of his kids last month. And that was a real concern for him. Am I going to be able? There's number one thing before we had 17 last month was, my baby is going to be having her second birthday, and I just don't want to miss that. And so he thinks about others, and I think that is a truly outstanding personal characteristic that we don't see so often. Maybe elders feel that that's common in the younger generation. What I also think the court really should consider is the PSI, and there was a couple of things here that I thought really stood out to me of all the PSIs I've seen. And we don't really have an issue with some of the things that the PSI talks about in terms of the record, the facts in the case. I think what really stood out to me, and I've never ever seen this in the PSI, and neither has Bill Counsel, on the section, page 12, defendant strengths. Normally, those are just factual things, such as his full-time employment, graduate, employed, strong family, whatever. Here, the writer was so impressed by Mr. James that the writer indicated his personal characteristics: confident, easy to talk to, smart, and has future goals. And I cannot recall ever seeing a writer actually comment in that section. And I just think that means something. It's something that stood out to me. And the writer recommends an imposing state sentence for probation. I think that makes a lot of sense here. The offense itself, I don't, having a firearm, not probation, I think in some cases maybe deterrent effect is more important. In this case, given his age, given how much of a promising future he has, I think probationary needs should be here to help. I would say that he's really gone a long way in terms of rehabilitating himself just structurally and through the family support that he has and his support to them and that mutual relationship, but also just to help him along the way to continue the progress that he's made, really in terms of being a good father, having a stable job, those kind of goals. I think that's what should try to do. This is an offense, as the state said, it's his first adult felony conviction. I think that because this was possession of a firearm by an adjudicated delinquent, I think it separates it and mitigates it compared to other possession of firearm by a felon. Right? And someone's an adult and they have the capacity to understand the warning when it's very, very clearly given to them in writing, when they have an attorney, right? And when they're an adult and they're held to a higher level of responsibility. So I think in this case, this being his first conviction of a felony offense, he's now, truly understands that. It's a big consequence to him. It's no longer something that is hidden from the public or sealed or kept confidential and privileged. This is now his adult criminal record. And I think that itself is quite a big punishment for him because he's otherwise had no criminal record, since he was 18 and now he's 24 with a felony conviction. There are certain statements that his significant other, and I would like to make if the court would permit that as well as his mother, Christina, who's here.
Sure. He has an absolute right to that.
You have to spell her name.
Pardon?
State and spell.
Good. So we have some order to it. Madam, could you state your full name?
Anna Herrera.
Ms. Herrera, you now can make such statement as you wish, please.
Hi, Your Honor, my name is Anna Herrera, and I'm Demetrius' significant other. I've known Demetrius for 10 years, but we've been dating for the last 5 years. We have 3 kids and 2 youngest. The 2 youngest we share together, and the oldest is not biologically his, but he has always accepted her and loved her.
I'm sorry, can you
The
slow
same.
down, please?
Slow up a little bit.
Slow down, please. The oldest is not biologically his.
But he has always accepted her and loved her the same. Demetrius has always been an upright character in the community. In our relationship, he has always been there for me when I needed him the most, especially when it comes to our children and family. Demetrius has done so much to improve his life to become a better man and father in the time we spend together. Our children really, truly adore him. He watches the kids while I go to work every day in the morning, and I keep them at night when he goes to work. We have a really good system when it comes to the kids. Demetrius is not just a weekend dad. He is a full-time father. He is a great role model.
You're doing really good, ma'am. Take a couple minutes.
He is a great role model to our children and others. He's a hardworking, independent, and thoughtful. He has a big heart and is willing to help anyone.
Thank you for your statement. It's good that you made it, but it's also good that he heard it. You can take your seat now. Council, you indicated a second person is going to come forward. Please call that person now.
Yes, his mother, Christina.
And ma'am, as you are seated, get comfortable, please. Could you please state your full name?
Hi, my name is Christina Griffin,
Could you spell your last name?
Griffin.
Right, Ms. Griffin, now you can make such statement as you wish.
I guess I'm gonna say I don't know where to start. But I'm here to let you know that my son is a great son. As a child coming up, yes, he made bad decisions, but becoming an adult, he has really changed and grown into a mature man that he is today. Every holiday or family gathering we have at his house, he invites everyone over, even though some might not show. He helps family members, like when they in need. Like he also helped the 2 nephews trying to get, my other 2 nephews trying to get on track. He helped them got a job where he works. So hopefully that's leading them down the right path. He always assists the family and helps the family whenever there's a need. He's a loving son, father, great. He's respectful, he loving, he caring, and he also cares about others. There's not one person I know that he has disrespect, not even as an adult.
Ma'am, thank you again as mother for making that statement about your son. You can take your seat. Anything more, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, before I get to Mr. James, we would like to speak, in terms of a sentence, I think that, we have Mr. James here, he's a man with a bright future, and also, Ms. Herrera who spoke, I think the court can consider also that she's also very good at time. She seems entrepreneurial, she started her own clothing business, she works in home healthcare, she has no criminal record. Right? Those are all great signs for the court to consider in terms of future life stability. He's already demonstrated it over a period of 4 years, 3 years of when he was charged, but he's done very well. But both of them together, have been building a family and are doing something very, very good at such a young age, and that's what really impressed me. And so, in my opinion, continuing that is the best rehabilitating force. There's so many of us who don't, who are such as Your Honor or counsel for the state or Attorney Nolan and I, right? We don't have to be on probation. We have certain structures in our lives that keep us grounded, that keep us disciplined, that keep us on the right path and not committing crimes. And I think he is now within that structure and on that path. And I think he has all the signs to show lots of promising things in the future in terms of his family and his career and where he lives, his children, their futures, their school. And I think that both councils have recognized that it would almost be, in my opinion, it would be like to go backwards if we were to incarcerate him in prison or something that was harsh like that. I think we should.
Okay, we're kind of going in a circle. You made that point about 4 times.
Okay.
Anything further before I listen to your client?
One last thing, Your Honor, I think the court can also consider the pandemic. And there was an article that came out in Forbes, I think last month in July, talking about the increased chance of 550% for those who are in custody to get the virus. And so I think the court can consider that. In terms of, we would ask for probation here, length, whatever the court thinks is appropriate. And if there's conditional jail time the court would like him to serve, I would ask the court to stay that, put a probation review. We can also use that to monitor the situation with the pandemic and make a further determination later based on how the situation is playing out. So we ask for fever time for him to continue childcare and work. I think that would be appropriate given all of that.
All right, thank you. Mr. James, anything you wish to say?
Hold the mic over, please.
Hi, my name is Eugene James. And I know I have I know this case has been going on for a really long time. But while I was on bill, like I accomplished so many things that I thought I wouldn't be able to do. But I overcame a couple fears and now focus to start a foundation for my family. Like I'm a hardworking man. Like only thing I get upset about is like when I was a kid. Like I always told myself I'd never catch a dope case because like you can't run from that. Like it's gonna stay with you forever. From when you were a kid, when you were 18, everything go away. But I'm here today, so I'm here to get through it. I'm here to get through it. Today, finally put this behind me and just move on with my life because waking up every day not knowing, like, he gonna go to jail, or like, I might never see my kids for like a whole year or something. Like, I wanna be a better dad than my dad was to me, because he was never around for me. Like, I never had a steady family, like, my mom was always there for me, she was my mom and my dad. So like, I just feel like I owe it to my kids, just to be there for them, you know, just to show them, just give them a different life. That's it.
You make a very good statement yourself. Some questions. How long have you worked for Colt Construction?
I worked there 3 years, no,
The two children you have with Ms. Herrera, has paternity been established for those children? And you reside with Ms. Herrera and are responsible for the day-to-day activities with your children then? All right, thank you. All right, Ms. James, you're to be sentenced on possession of a firearm due to, again, delinquency. Maximum penalties, as was earlier noted, $25,000 and/or 10 years divided between initial confinement and extended supervision. You're a young man, 24. You do have a prior record in the juvenile system, but it carries forward now in terms of this is your first adjudication of a felony as an adult. You actually were at Lincoln Hills for a period of time as a result of 3 burglaries in 2012. In 2011, there was an OVWAC, operating vehicle without owner's consent. In 2010, possession of a dangerous weapon. And in 2009, there were a number of cases, criminal damage to property, battery, trespass, disorderly conduct, and another battery. Clearly, a significant number of matters as a juvenile in a court system and placement in the juvenile correction system. While you were at Lincoln Hills, you did get your high school diploma, is that correct? And after your high school diploma, you got additional education. What is that? Okay. Are you planning on going to college further, or are you going to focus more on vocational matters?
Well, I want to go to college further, but I want to go to school for like, I can afford to fly out here.
Okay. Now, you're not married. Your attorney indicated, however, it's a plan that you and Ms. Herrera have sometime in the future, perhaps when the coronavirus stabilizes, you're planning on getting married. Now, I hope you live to be as old as Methuselah, but if you were to fall over dead in the next 10 minutes, your 2 children that you have with Ms. Herrera would not get Social Security because you, number one, aren't married. That's your own choice, but you have not established paternity for your children. It doesn't matter. You say you're the father. She accepts that you're the father, but paternity hasn't been established. So if you really say you love your children, I'm not telling you to marry the mother, but at a minimum, you would establish paternity, and you haven't done that. To me, that rings hollow a little bit when you say how you love your children, you care for your children. And Ms. Herrera points out not just the 2 children with her, but the other child. But if you really love your children, you're going to care for them in their future. And you haven't done that, at least in terms of paternity. You have an excellent work record at Colt Construction. In fact, when I looked at the letters that have been prepared, you are a valuable employee to that company. Even the point of extending a loan to you, but they view you as a very critical key employee within their business. The other letters also from a teacher, a coach, a girlfriend. You have a good system of support. And here in the courtroom, your mother made a very impassioned statement. And of course, Ms. Herrera made one as well. How do you compensate back for that? Really, it's a life you're going to lead. People are standing up for you today. And I guess it's going to be up to you to determine whether that is in vain, simply meaningless, or whether it really did have an impact on you and the life you're going to lead in the future. Your demeanor in court has been appropriate, when I looked at the pre-sentence, it indicates you have major anger issues. In other words, you want things to go in a particular order, and if they don't, or if things aren't the way you want them, you tend to blow your stack and get angry at others. And it also talked about the whole concept of when things don't go right, you blame others. In other words, whatever it be at home or blaming, and usually people that blame others, it's blaming children or blaming your spouse. Now, that's an issue that has to be dealt with. The offense here relates to person, great dangerousness because of the weapon, aggravated your extensive juvenile record, but mitigated by the fact that this is your first adult offense and you're 24 years of age. You are fully responsible for the offense that did occur. Public has a right to be safe. Weapons do the exact opposite of safety, particular weapons here where you're not supposed to even have a weapon. The court requires, the appellate court, that I focus as well on your rehabilitation needs. That's why I focused on the anger issue that has to be dealt with. All of us in life, you can say never get angry, but we get angry and things happen. But we have to learn how to deal with that in a way that doesn't diminish others or ourselves. I must consider the gravity of the offense, and if there were a particular victim, certainly the input of those victims. I noticed one of the statements in the pre-sentence report gives a medium risk relative to recidivation. Now, I put all that matter together. The court is going to act as follows. I'm going to follow the recommendation of imposing and staying a sentence and then using probation. But before I do that, I want to make this statement to you. More people go to prison in the state of Wisconsin because their probation is revoked than go to prison as a result of a direct order by a court that you go to prison for a sentence. The point is, many people, close to 50%, fail on probation and then they go to prison. So simply to take the approach that your attorney is suggesting that I impose and stay a sentence and then you're on probation, things like your approach is prevailing. But it only works if you follow the conditions of probation. Many, if not most people who get the opportunity for probation fail. So although you succeed in getting it, unless you do the things that are called for, you're going to simply be one of those people who ends up having probation revoked and going to prison. Do you have any question about that concept? Could you speak to me in the English language? All right. In this case, it's the order of the court, you be committed to the Wisconsin State Prison System for a term of 14 months, initial confinement to be followed by a period of 14 months of extended supervision. Credit for time served, number of days. Your attorney is going to say the number of days, 0. No credit for time served. Now, every sentence involves certain risks. I'm going to order that sentence that I've just imposed be stayed. And in lieu thereof, you're to be placed on 14 months of supervision. I think that the terms I'm going to establish as conditions of supervision are well within your ability. Certainly with the support you've got from Ms. Herrera, from your mother, and from others. But ultimately, it's going to be your choice as to whether you do the right things, not just on the sunny days when everything is going your way, but on the bad days when things aren't going so well. Now, conditions first. 30 days of conditional time stayed that can be used by the agent. The agent feels that's necessary as an alternative to revocation. District Attorney, any restitution in this case?
No.
No restitution, set at 0. Not imposing any fine, but you must pay the court costs associated with this matter, as well as all mandatory surcharges, and you're to pay that at the rate of $50 a month. Today being the 6th day of August, the first payment is to be due on the 6th day of September, and the 6th day of every month thereafter, till all of the mandatory court costs and surcharges are paid in full. You understand that? Counseling is to occur as the agent deems appropriate, and I particularly want the counseling to focus on the anger issues and dealing with the good things that happen to us in life, but also the bad things, so that when things don't go your way, You don't let anger get in the way of creating a problem and perhaps having your probation revoked. But counseling is to occur as the agent deems appropriate. Paternity is to be established for your children. Now, if you marry the mom, that's between you and the mom. I'm not into that. But whether you marry or not, I want paternity established. Now, if you marry the mom, that establishes who the father is. But if you don't marry the mother, you still have to establish paternity. And you must take steps in the next 7 days to begin the process. On the very first floor of the building you're in right this minute, there's an office, the child support unit, the 4D unit, where you can go in and register and begin the process of establishing paternity. You understand that? You're to provide a DNA specimen. You're not to possess a firearm ever. What did I just say to you? But what if somebody says, here, just hold this for 5 minutes, I'll be right back. What do you do? Yeah, you can't say that somebody else gave it to you, you can't possess it. You can't even reside in a home where someone else has a legal right to possess a weapon. You couldn't be in that home. Do you understand that? You're not to possess any controlled substance at all, and the department may use random UAs and other means to provide verification of compliance with that. Do you understand that point? You may not vote until your civil liberties have been restored as well. And finally, it's the order of the court that you be involved in providing 40 hours of community service work at the rate of at least 5 hours a month. That'd mean take 8 months basically to get that 40 hours done. It can be in your neighborhood, your church, where you do something for others. You won't be paid in money, but it's giving back to the community. Are there any of the conditions I've just set that you feel you could not comply with? District Attorney, anything more the state wants done?
I have nothing to add.
Council, anything more both council want done?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. James, excuse me, Madam Clerk, anything more we need done in the order here?
Appeal rights and programs.
Eligibility for both programs in terms of the prison system. Council, you'll provide the appeal rights, is it yes or no? All right. Ms. James, good luck to you. People stood up for you today. I hope you remember that as you lead your life forward. Good luck.
Council, can you spell Mr. Herrera's last name, please? Herrera. And please spell his place of employment. Colt, C-O-L-T. Construction. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't tell if it was coal or coke or. It wasn't anything that I thought it was.
When did you know that? Here's that order.
Is the next one ready?
That'd be 5 o'clock.
Pardon?
5 o'clock, yeah.
Okay, like 4 minutes. But the next one's not ready?
No, the attorney didn't show.
What, we got 4 minutes. What will happen? Carry it forward to tomorrow?